Bing, bam, boom. All right, we're back with a quick one today. I'm making gluten-free pizza for dinner. So I'm going to show you guys how to make gluten-free pizza crust, gluten-free vegan pizza crust. Gluten-free, vegan, baking writ large. I'll put pizza crust in there as baking. Is difficult. You know, if you look up gluten-free recipes, oftentimes to substitute for the proteins in gluten that bind stuff together, they're going to tell you to use eggs. If you look at vegan baking, cooking, oftentimes you're going to find that it relies a lot on wheat products, whether it's seitan, which is sort of central ingredient in a lot of vegan faux meat products. Doing them both at once can be tricky, but I love pizza, and in an effort to not give that up, I came up with what I think is hands down the best vegan gluten-free pizza crust you can make at home. It's really easy. It's best if you make it just a little bit ahead of time to get it to rise, but other than that, you're good to go. You can make it even in the worst situations. Right now, the water to our house is shut off because our water line cracked. You know, the hits keep coming, but so does dinner. So we'll keep it short and sweet though. My sort of secret to a great pizza crust is a combination of gluten-free flour and cornmeal. If you ever had a cornmeal pizza crust, it can be very tasty. It's obviously very different from what you might get if you went and got sort of a traditional pizza in, let's say you go to New York and get a slice, or you buy a pizza pie. You're going to get that sort of fluffy, chewy, crispy on the bottom, double aught flour, really triple aught? I don't know. Really sort of fluffy and light pizza crust in a way. This and that, but it's very good. It holds up well. It's still crispy. It's still got good bounce to it, bit of chew to it. It doesn't get soggy if you cook it right, and it's got a lot of flavor. So simply put, the recipe, such as it is equal parts gluten-free flour, cornmeal, and then about as much water as those two combined. So if you're using a cup of regular flour, gluten-free flour, and a cup of cornmeal, you'd put in 2 cups of water. You add the water bit by bit to get the texture right. You might need a little more, a little less. We'll see how we go. In addition to that, yeast, which will give you a bit of rise. If you make this ahead of time, let it sit for an hour or two, it'll get a little bit of air in there, which helps to get not a super dense crust. And then you don't have to use it, but I like to use a little bit of just egg. I use just egg in a lot of things. It does, when it cooks, give you a bit of a replication of that sort of eggy proteins holding things together. I have made this successfully without it. You can also substitute ground flax meal if you had it. Makes a great vegan egg substitute for baking. I use either just egg or ground flax meal in pancake batter as well. Both work really well. So, easy as pizza pie. Gluten-free flour. I really like the Bob's Red Mill 1-to-1. Works a treat. I've got an equal amount of, again, Bob's Red Mill. I like that stuff. Gluten-free cornmeal. The secret of the cornmeal is that it's a larger grain. Even when it's ground up, it's a larger texture. So rather than being super fine flour, it's actually got little nuggets of crushed up corn in there, which the secret to that I find is when those absorb water, they puff up a little bit. So when you cook it, the chunkiness of the cornmeal actually adds a fluffier texture, even though you might think with pizza dough you're going for that real fine flour. With gluten-free stuff, you lose a lot of the proteins that'll bind things together even as they rise. And the cornmeal does, it's not the same, but it helps you avoid the sogginess or the density of just using gluten-free flour. I've got about a tablespoon of yeast. I just use regular dry yeast. Shaboom. In the mixer, just mix those together. But you want to add, I'm using warm water, and this is 2 cups of warm water, and I've got about 4 cups of flour in there. So you can see that's pretty thick. Now what I like to do is add a couple of tablespoons of the just egg, see how it looks, and that's still a little too thick for my taste. So I'm gonna add just a little more water to that. And like I said, you want to keep an eye on it as you make it. Now you might think that's good, but the cornmeal is going to absorb a lot of that water. We'll scrape it down in a sec. And my secret to making this crust just right is to have it pretty thin and spreadable, not a thick dough. So we've given it a little scrape, and you can see it's got a pretty good texture in there. I'm going to add just a touch more water to that. And a little pinch of salt. Boom. So that's about the texture I go for. You can see it's a pretty runny pizza dough. And I guess perhaps I should call it pizza batter rather than pizza dough, because it doesn't get that same, you know, ball of dough texture that you'd get with your regular pizza crust. And the technique for cooking it obviously changes as well. I like to cook it in a cast iron pan. Once you've given that an hour or so to rise, the cornmeal absorbs some of the water, it'll thicken up a little. You're going to get a cast iron skillet, get it pretty hot on the stove, splash of oil in there, and then take a big dollop of that, put it in and spread it around. Let it crisp up a little, and then pop it in the oven on high, 500 degrees Fahrenheit. You're at, oh man, we did this before, I think it's 380 C. But pop it on high and bake it for a little bit, or put it under the broiler and let it get really crispy. And once you've got it crispy on the bottom from the hot pan and then crisp it under the stove on top, you've got a crispy crust. You can set that aside. You can make 4 or 5 of these crusts, set them aside, and then when you're ready to make your pizza, pop them back in the pan with some heat under it, start topping it and cooking your pizzas. I guess I should look at the camera. Man, I'm just absolutely new. I keep staring at myself. Yeah, pop it in the oven and top it, and it'll hold up well to that. It'll hold up well to the sauce and the toppings you put on it. It'll still have some good texture to it, so it's not falling apart when you pick up your slice. I love it. As always, I'll probably throw some pictures on as we go, and as requested by a friend of mine, I'll throw a bit of a recipe in the description so you can see how it goes. I'd love to hear how it works for folks. I'm a big fan of pizza. It's delicious. It's when you're vegan, it's one of the easiest things to miss. It was the hardest. It was the last thing I gave up, was pizza. A couple of beers at trivia night and a slice of cheese pizza looked almost irresistible after years and years of eating cheese. But it's been, 10 years now I've been vegan, and I make pizza pretty regularly and I absolutely love it. Nothing tastes better than doing the right thing in the end. Anywho, that's the video. I'll finish it up with some before and afters, and we'll go from there. See you guys next time.